Tone Talk.
How's everybody doing today? This is Attorney Antonio Moore. I'm here today to talk about Donald Trump's statements yesterday about police brutality being almost like okay and Black lives basically not mattering. I want to actually get into that. I want to show you some videos throughout this discussion and just give you my viewpoint on it. Before I start, I want you to go to tonetalks.org, subscribe and donate there. You can donate through PayPal, totally secure, and subscribe to my YouTube channel through tonetalks.org. And then you can also see all my past articles on different topics around this and other matters. So getting right into it, Donald Trump yesterday made a comment about basically, and I want to read it so that we get it accurate. When you guys put somebody in a car and you're protecting their head, you know the way you put their hand over. Trump said, miming the physical motion, like don't hit their head, and they just kill somebody, don't hit their head. I said you can take the hand away. So you had Donald Trump basically talking and referencing Freddie Grays and referencing Baltimore and referencing that rough paddy wagon ride that Freddie Grays went through, and that we know so many other African American males particularly go through throughout the year here in this country. Now, the reality of the Oval Office actually making that statement, it coming from the president, is bad enough. But then in addition, to have him say this in New York in front of all these police with the history of New York City with stop and frisk and everything like that, and the police applauding it. It was a statement to me against everything that Black Lives Matter stands for, a statement against the history of our country being so atrocious, a statement saying what Make America Great Again really means. And I just want to cut the video in so you can actually see that, come back, have a discussion, and then actually allow you guys to comment at the bottom and get the dialogue going, because we need to get this around so that everybody knows. You know, we know that Trump is known to say statements that are ignorant, but I mean something like this was just atrocious. Let's watch the video.
And when you see these towns and when you see these thugs being thrown into the back of a paddy wagon, you just see them thrown in rough. I said, please don't be too nice. Like when you guys put somebody in the car and you're protecting their head, you know, the way you put their hand over. Like, don't hit their head, and they've just killed somebody, don't hit their head. I said, you can take the hand away, okay?
So now coming back from the video, if you see, Trump is basically saying Black Lives Matter doesn't matter. That's just the way I took it. And I think that for a lot of us, the reality that the large part of America, there's a large part of America that sides with him on this view, that wants to forget the history of this country, that wants to move into a whole nother space where essentially we go back to a time when Black people were essentially second class. I mean, we could argue about the economics, but on a social level, we have had progress in terms of Black people being able to move around this country. But it's come at such a cost of hiding everything, which is the way I've described things through mass incarceration, which is an important thing to understand. I'm not going to pull up any charts, but what I will say is that we have to understand that one of the highest incarceration rates ever recorded in the modern world was during South Africa during apartheid. And it was 50 per 100,000 for young Black males in South Africa. But today, Black males in this country are at 10,000 per 100,000, and that's where the dead bodies of racism have been hidden. It's basically to take this large number, take them out of the unemployment data, take them out of the system, blame them for their own actions, call them thugs, which I'll get to later on in this discussion, and allow America to hide from the fact that you created such a cesspool for social failure without addressing any of the realities of what you owe us, and owe these people that you're calling thugs. That allows me to segue. There's a new book called Dream Hoarders. Business Insider did a great piece called Wages and Wives. I put it on my Facebook. You should check it out. But the big thing I wanted to pull out of that was that in this book, Dream Hoarders, what it shows is that the upper middle class of America, the top 20% of America, is basically taking all the opportunity. So if you're not in the top 20%, if your children are not in the top 20% through you, and understand, I'm not blaming you for this, because historically black Americans were shut out, but I'm just telling you the facts of it. You're shut out. And it's like, people want to know, what can you do about it? I don't know what you do to get $500,000. So to get in the top 20% of America, first of all, let me say this. The top 20% of America is nearly all white. Let me say it again. The top 20% that's getting all the opportunity in America for all professional jobs, everything of the sort, is nearly all white. All the social networking is nearly all white. I don't care what they show you on Yahoo. I don't care how many President Obamas they create, who also came from white privilege. You know, white privilege because he inherited $500,000 from his white grandmother, which is basically the likening of a white man. So nonetheless, I'm telling you today that if you don't have just about $500,000, which would put you in and around the top 20%, you are locked out in this country. They're just not telling you. So you might say, what does that mean for black people? I'm telling you now, like, to get in the top 5% of black families, if it's 350, maybe 2%, less than 2% have more than $500,000. So that should tell you nearly the whole race is locked out. The only way to answer this is black politics, collective black politics that stands up to statements like those made by Trump. But we have a contingency that basically believes in what Trump is saying. Oh, Freddie Gray was a thug. The Baltimore rioters were thugs, and that they needed to have their clocks cleaned, and the police need to be able to come in and do dirty work. And I don't agree with that. And I guess what's happening is that life opportunity for African Americans is being taken away. We are being locked out of the American dream. And I feel like in so many ways, like, what's a trip about it all is that we aren't loud enough as it's happening. You know, the fact that this man, the president of America, was able to say what he said yesterday is such a disrespect to Freddie Grays' memory, and to not just him, Eric Garner, Philando Castile, all Trayvon Martin. I mean, we can go back to Emmett Till. This is we haven't made history enough a part of the discussion as if it's all fixed now, and we got to make it part of the discussion. We can't allow this just to be some matter where it's just about Freddie Gray. We got to make it about all of us, because if we don't, then our sons will suffer, and our daughters. And so, you know, there was a great article I'm gonna pull up right now. You'll be able to see that right here. It's called "How Baltimore's Young Black Men Are Boxed In" by ESPN 538. I'm gonna pull it up larger and read a section from you. The economic realities facing men like Gray and many of the young people who took to the streets after his funeral are indeed harsh. The unemployment rate for black men in Baltimore between the ages of 20 and 24 was nearly 40% in 2013. The latest data available for white men of the same age range, the rate was 10%, nor do the prospects for black men improve much as they grow older. Just 60% of black men between the ages of 25 and 54 are working, compared with 80% of white men. Just 1 in 10 black men in Baltimore have a college degree, compared with half of white men above the ages of 25. And the median income for black households is a little more than half of whites. I mean, you can't compete or survive if white people have double what you have and get inheritance. How are you supposed to go buy the same house? This is not a matter of just trying to catch up to white people. This is the reality in the context of what blackness left, what race left behind. Codified race. The U.S. government by law gave white people a bunch of advantage in a bunch of ways to cheat black people. And now where we're at is like people like Donald Trump don't have no knowledge of history. And they just say stuff like what he said is just atrocious. Basically, you know, he called Freddie Gray a thug. He wasn't a thug. He was doing poverty crimes. And I'll show you in a second. Poverty crimes come from the fact that there's no jobs, that there's unemployment. That comes from the fact that the government failed him. And I just think that it failed his community. It failed so many communities. Why was Eric Garner out there selling cigarillos? Why was you just start looking at, you know, why is it that Philando Castile couldn't use the right to bear arms just like anyone else? He had his CCW. He told the officer. Black America doesn't understand how bad this is. They don't understand that this is the moment, and where we're at is at a place where President Donald Trump has shown that he doesn't think Black Lives Matter. And so we also have to understand and give context to this and not just say it's Trump calling our young men thugs, because it isn't. You know, it isn't just Trump. We saw it from Mayor Stephanie Rawlings. We saw it from President Obama during the Baltimore riots. Both of them used the same terminology. And we can't allow for people who supposedly to be with us using the same terms to describe us that describe basically the worst kind of people in a society, that, and also it's just inaccurate. You know, so, you know, we look at the word thug and we kind of blame people like Trump all too appropriately for using the word, but we also have to take some ownership and look at the people that we put in position that use it as well. We look at Mayor Stephanie Rawlings and President Obama during the Baltimore riots using the word thug to describe young black men who are clearly in a position of economic powerlessness. And we use this word to describe the Baltimore rioters who only were following and hearkening back to civil rights like the Watts riots and the LA riots, civil unrest that came from economic blight. And I think that when you look at it, both uses allowed the person, the political person, whether it be Rawlings or Obama, to basically step away from their role in creating or maintaining that economic blight. With Obama, 1.7% of SBA loans given to black people. How can we employ our own black people if we have no wealth and you don't open the doors? You look under Obama, incarceration didn't move the needle. He did little things around the fringes that people maybe will comment in the comments, but they were around the fringes. Look at Obama, he did very little for black media. I mean, there's just so many examples. You look at Rawlings, and she wasn't a good mayor in Baltimore. She didn't do enough. And I understand that she only had so much power, but I mean, you can't come in there and do just the same thing. You can't run the motions when your people ain't eating. And then call them thugs when they actually stand up. You know, Rawlings said, too many people, she said, and this is, I believe she tweeted this during the Baltimore riots, have invested in building up this city to allow thugs to tear it down. And for me, you haven't been to Baltimore if you think they were tearing something down. The amount of blight, you know, I saw one special where, unlike where you might live, just like where I live, where we have a Food for Less or a Kroger's, these people are shopping at a liquor store. There isn't, there's a food desert. Much of the second level buildings are vacant, meaning like you'll see the first floor and there'll be the liquor store, but then the top floor will be this vacant thing that's above it. Don't paint a picture for people that don't live there that Freddie Grays was living amongst all this opportunity and chose to fail. Paint a picture about what the community is so it can be corrected. Same thing goes for Donald Trump. Donald Trump is speaking about these quote unquote thugs with no context. Give a context of what Baltimore was and what you're going to do to fix it, Mr. President. And so, you know, you had Obama say something similar during the same like Baltimore riots, where he said, you got some of the same organizers now going back into these communities to try to clean up in the aftermath after a handful of criminals and thugs who tore up the place. That's not what happened with Baltimore. It wasn't a handful of criminals and thugs. It was the community, particularly the young people, frustrated from a lack of opportunity, Mr. President. And so, like, when you have a president that at that point had been in office, I believe, for 7 years and done so little for African Americans as a community, you know, 45%, we've talked about this, 45% unemployment, for black males under his tenure, working age black males in 35 major cities. The rise of Uber, not a good look. I've discussed that. You can check that out in the prior video. I mean, it's just so many examples of just how Obama failed black America, and particularly then failed Baltimore. And then to look at this and not take some ownership and say, and come out to the podium and say, I own this, I'm falling on this, I want to do more for Baltimore, instead of trying to relegate this to a corner where it's a small number, because it wasn't a small number. I'm going to pull up a little bit of these people marching later on in the video, but it wasn't a small number, and it wasn't thugs. It was people. It was black people. And for you to use that language shows you and Trump don't have that far a view of difference about us. My thing about it is, coming back to it, I think Trump he was absolutely wrong. I think that he has to be held to task. I think that Donald Trump says some of the most ignorant things I've ever heard from the office, from the Oval Office. But at the same time, we got to have that same standard for everybody. And we got to hold people to task when they say things that don't necessarily respect us or represent us. And, you know, I come back to it, and I want to give you guys the origin of the term thug. And when you look at the word thug, it comes from the Hindi thuggy or tuggy. It is derived from the word thag, which means deceiver or thief or swindler. They worked in general, meaning thugs, by joining travelers, gaining their trust, and then murdering them through strangulation was their preferred method, and stealing their valuables. Again, pulling that back up, that doesn't describe Freddie Gray. That doesn't describe Alton Sterling. That doesn't describe Eric Garner. And it really doesn't describe Trayvon Martin. These are not people that are murderers. How did we allow a term like thug, which elicits a pretty visceral reaction, how do we allow that term to be used against our young boys and not stand up? And so, you know, I want to pull up Freddie Grays' rap sheet. What you see on it, I want you to really read it, because it's a bunch of possession crimes. It's I think a single burglary, but most of it is just possession. These are called poverty crimes. These are kind of crimes that can be avoided if somebody has an opportunity for a job. You know, I told you earlier, so like half the black men don't have no job. There ain't no jobs. And somebody would say, can't he just go to another city? Well, I just told you 35 cities by the census don't have half unemployment for African American males. So going to another city where you have no network relationships doesn't fix this. We have a problem here. That problem starts with the lack of opportunity and ends with the president. President Trump calling black men thugs and saying to the police it's okay to give them a rough ride in a paddy wagon. That's irresponsible and insensitive to a community that has faced a legacy of disenfranchisement, beatings, lynchings, slavery. For you to sit there in the Oval Office and call us and basically disrespect our community that way, it's a problem, and I'm here to tell you that. And so we look at Freddie Grays' rap sheet and we wonder, what could we have done to fix this? And I feel like we could have done a lot. You know, and one of those is just recognize him as a person, not a thug. How many of us walked past him and just seen him as a problem for the community versus looked him in the eyes and just said hello and made him feel like a person? And he has to own some of it too. There were programs and different things that maybe he walked past that he could have joined. So there's a reality here that there's a bigger story with Trump and his statements yesterday that we can discuss, while at the same time holding feet to the fire and making sure Trump understands that's not going to work, calling us, saying that it's okay for the police to give us rough rides and put us into the paddy wagon in a bad way. You know, I want to end by cutting in Nick Mosby. Shout out to him, council member in Baltimore. Marilyn Mosby, shout out to her because she did a great job standing up for black people during the Freddie Gray case, even though I feel like black people didn't stand up for her hardly enough. Nick Mosby was interviewed on MSNBC. Great interview, really laying out the context for the box of opportunity that so many black youth face in Baltimore. And I wanted you to see that so you can understand and give context to the ignorance of Trump's statement. Check it out. We'll end out after we come back.
The distrust in the community, and unfortunately this is bigger than just police brutality. This is a socioeconomic issue. These are folks who somewhat live in abject poverty, folks who don't have necessarily access to quality schooling, folks who don't have necessarily access to quality opportunities. You know, when a young person is born in this world, we constantly say you can be whatever you want to be in life, but unfortunately it's a reality. It, depending on your zip code and depending on your poverty level, directly depends on sometimes the trajectory that you can live out in life. And these young folks are angry, and this is how they're showing their anger. You know, most of the time they feel voiceless, they feel disenfranchised, and this is an opportunity for them to show the world that frustration, and they're speaking it in the way of violence.
Where are they going, those kids, if they don't get in trouble with the law, if they do keep a clean record? Do they have a future to look forward to? Is there a job opportunity, a market for an 18-year-old kid who graduates, say a regular C student, not a genius, but a regular kid? Where's he going?
Unfortunately, we're seeing the richer getting richer, and the divide between middle class and upper class, and you know, opportunities are less, specifically in these areas. There's limited access to quality commercial opportunities as it relates to, you know, hiring these children. You know, many of these areas, they are only filled with like with liquor stores, not really real opportunities. So no, I mean, I think many of these folks, they feel voiceless, they feel disenfranchised, but they also feel hopeless. They feel like they don't necessarily have a connection. And you know, that's one thing that we can change in this country, and that we must change in this country. And when viewers are watching us all across America, this is not a Baltimore City thing. This is an urban America thing, and these kids are screaming for help.
So after watching that video, you can't help but understand that Trump saying that black lives don't matter is basically just ignorance. They do matter, and we have to make them matter, and we have to hold his feet to the fire and make sure he understands that it's a problem if you don't recognize that. Again, thank you guys for tuning in. Go to tonetalks.org, subscribe, donate, share this. Let's get the dialogue going. Thanks again.